Hello.
Hi, everyone. Let me just admit people for a moment. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Hello.
About to be out of a hotel room, hopefully. So
Cool.
they told me
Stop
the
back.
role had.
Where are you
go
on?
ahead. Colorado. At this point in time.
The big
Then I'm going to
meeting.
Chicago D-Rep, and then they told me travel was included in the role, but I didn't know how much travel. So
You have to ask these specific things
yeah.
or just accept it. My last job was mergers and acquisitions, so I traveled around the world, but it was pretty cool.
Oh,
Yeah.
no kidding.
Sometimes it's cool. Today, personally, I'm in Prague. I came here for a conference, and I'm in a crypto institute, so there's a lot of crypto people in the
That
space.
sounds pretty cool, dude.
It's really cool. So maybe let's start with the usual round of quick introductions, just one-liners. So I'm Lucas, I do DevX for Maestro. Can we just go around the table very briefly?
I'm happy. Next, I am Christina Gianelloni. I am the COO of Blink Labs, and I am the head of the board of Pragma.
Yep, I'm Nicolas from the Marlowe team. Yeah, a new partner of the CBIA.
Anyone else?
I'm Christian, head of the Open Source Office, Intersect. And Nick apologizes he couldn't make it, but we did have Sandeep come to join. I'll pass it to him.
Hi, I'm Sandeep. I'm from B Quadrant, also part of the open source committee, and happy to join here.
Welcome.
Adam.
Hi, I'm Roberto. I'm one of the co-founders of Andamio, Learning and Contribution Management System.
I'm Lee. I'm the operator of Joker Pool, member of the CBI work.
I'm Martin from M2 Tech, owner. I design payment systems, and I work with the Game Changer team to make that easier and faster.
Nice to meet you, Martin.
Hi, I'm Uday Solanki, and I'm from India. We have, in fact, hub here, Cardano, India, and I'm new to this group.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right. I think maybe let's get started then. So I'm going to start sharing. Sorry.
I was going to say, we do have 3 other open source committee people, if they want to introduce themselves. We got Adam, Salona, and Alex as well.
Howdy, I'm Salona. I'm the, I was hired as an open source consultant on open source and nonprofit entities. I've been doing it over 20 years. So you got any questions? I'm here as a resource.
Okay. That's it. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Let's jump in. I'm going to start sharing my window. And so, yeah, the theme of today is meets the Open Source Office from the Intersect Open Source Committee. And thank you for joining to all our guests. Just before we jump in, just to recontextualize a bit, CBIA is the Cardano Blockchain Infrastructure Alliance. We started early 2023, and usually known as CBIA. Our goal is to discuss infrastructure-related topics on Cardano and to find solutions or contribute to collaboration of standards and all the themes that you can explore on our page, cbia.io. As we saw, there's a number of founding and other members of CBIA on the call. And let's jump straight into today's discussion. I have this document where I added some notes. I shared it with Christian before the call, and let me just find the chat. I would suggest if anyone has questions, maybe more towards the mid-final part of the call, you can write them on the document that I just dropped on the chat. And so this is the question. This is the section where you can jump in as we progress and leave your questions for us to review, to go over in a bit. So also on the document, you'll find the links for the main charter documentation and other documents that Christian was kind to share with us. So we went over the guests already, and maybe let's. I would just jump in. Invite Christian to jump in and start introducing the content. So the main outline that I have here is a bit some context or introduction to the open source committee, and from there onwards, I would suggest we take this structure. There's this very relevant area that Christian detailed, and I copied it in here. But before we get to going through these points, maybe I would ask you to start from the top. Would that be okay?
Yeah, happy to jump in and coordinate on that. I'm again Christian. Terrence, who just joined the calls, the other open source office guy with me. He's the program manager, so anything I can't manage or I just don't feel like doing, I just give it to him, for lack of a better word. But he's been helping, serving as the open source committee secretary. We launched the group back in August when Intersect was founded, and then we were trying to figure out how we do the committee, and we had a bunch of members sign up, so we just reached out to everyone. Whoever raised their hands comprised the early committee, and we decided to make it an interim advisory body until the end of July this year. Then we're going to do the election cycle so the membership can actually start jumping in and replacing some of those seats, which we have 3 right now that we're going to get ready to run in Q3. But Roundhouse, we do have Adam Dean, probably the latest joiner to the committee. We got Sandeep, who's our vice chair. Salona's our consulting advisory and everything else role. And then, yeah, myself. The
Sorry,
anyone?
Is it a good time to go over this document or just?
I'm going to get to that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. I was just going over the committee structure itself.
Thanks.
So with the committee, the publication document I went over last time, I can quickly run through that again, if that's.
Which one?
Is that okay? That's that slide. That's here real fast. It was what I shared last time we were on the call. Same document, but it gives the structure to our cadence and such.
Okay.
I dropped the links at the bottom. Sorry, forgot to link that in there.
Yeah.
But this is just the situation. Cardano, everyone's familiar with it. It wasn't effectively open source because it was under IOG direct development with founding entities. Intersect now exists, so we had the mandate to make it more open source. So we've made the committee to actually collect community feedback and how do we effectively address open source. And then the open source office is Intersect's direct support to that committee function, so we can make sure that this gets streamlined. If you can go to slide 3, Lucas. The next thing was, those are the 7 areas that we did. We did 90 days feedback survey that Sandeep helped collate of community feedback, getting specific critics and such. And basically, I think everyone can kind of agree with this. There's the limited documentation, centralization concerns, lack of community engagement. You can look at that just by the issue counter on Cardano node. Most of the actual development went into the development of the code rather than addressing community issues, stuff like that. And we're just here to help rectify that, as well as the complexity of the code base, because mostly everything's in Haskell. And that source link right there in this doc, which will be shared, that just collates the whole community survey feedback and where we came into developing the strategy. But there's multiple pillars in here, and our strategy is going to evolve to address all of these. The ones that we chose to first go after was the governance and decision making, the community engagement and collaboration, and the technological sustainability, which I think is on the second page for that doc. Yeah, sustainability funding models is where that comes into. We just changed it to technical sustainability because we didn't figure out the funding portion yet until the other committees come up to the same status we are at the moment. But going back to the publication doc on slide 4, or the next page, we hit the strategic pillars, and that's where the strategy came in. And so by focusing on those key targets, that was what was going to comprise our open source strategy, and that is linked in the document that I shared with everyone. And it kind of goes over the high level image of the strategy, where it gave the mission, vision, values for the committee, how we were plugging into Intersect's objectives, that target audience we're going for, which is the Cardano community and developers. And then our strategic pillars, which are these 3. And then we have specific goals associated with those 3 things. And you can go to the next slide. And that's where my function comes in for the Intersect side of it, is since the committee itself is just that body, they meet on a bi-weekly cadence now. The open source office is to jump in, help direct their mandates, as well as direct strategic initiatives for open source from our side. And so that's where we are actually just launched our developer advocate program. This ties in with the DevX working group also within Intersect, but we're looking to get 3 developer advocates to be technical community managers, capture the developer experience portion, feed that back into outputs that go into the committee so we can tailor our policies to the developers themselves and make sure we're actually addressing those pain points. We also have the Bitergia mechanism, which actually analyzes which is probably open source best practice for understanding your GitHub instance. We have that published report, which I'll share after this call too, which goes over the actual environment itself, showing the contribution rate, lines added, lines removed, and just overall affiliations and how projects are doing on a health scale. So we can share that too. I'll go later into detail on the support service catalog, but the open source office is actually going to have services that we can do to everyone who's even not a member of Intersect, just to help projects out with basic open source best practice, documentation writing, things associated with that, even legal counsel. We're scaling out what we can do based on our current resource load and then also the demand. And that we just finished closed focus groups. So I'll share that with everyone here. We're working on also the biggest piece of our strategy, which is the diversification of the maintainership of core Cardano, actually getting community people to be plugged in to help review and merge things. And then the contribution ladder of how you go from a new contributor to potentially a maintainer and actually highlight how that process works. Obviously, to be a maintainer on a project, you still have to work with the actual team on there and get their process approval as well. But at least this removes that barrier to entry and removes the centralization effect. And then we're also doing a pilot assessment right now by testing the maintainership and also doing a 14-point piece, which will be the last slide in this deck, which evaluates core Cardano as a whole based on a contributor use case on different things you would run into as a contributor that other open source environments do, and give us a letter grade on how we are effectively open source. I'm hoping to at least get a D or a C. We'll see how that goes, but obviously paths to remediate that to get a better piece. And then the last slide just kind of collates, or the next slide, collates how we're addressing those community concerns. The open source committee right now, we have a security policy which is going to take effect so we can actually handle security issues and have an escalation path for that. Project framework lifecycle, so all projects can be highlighted as to where they are in a scale, and we can see where a project's suffering and come back to help remediate that and bring them back to green. There is a governance policy which is live on our Gitbook, just so people know how there's the structure of it is you have your basic repo, and all projects are mandated to have maintainers hold transparent calls that people can plug into. So if you're on the Intersect page, you may see like the Plutus working group as a prime example, where everyone who contributes to that's involved. You can actually meet the maintainers, get questions asked, escalate issues, and get things addressed at that level. And then you have the back end, which is the GitHub comments and such. But at least that makes it clear as to where people plug in into that governance structure. We're also the project incubation. We're going to be reviewing it this Friday with the OSC, but this complements the framework where you have now we have categories for projects, but this opens the door for community projects to come into Intersect to help mature their practice. So an idea of where this comes in is Catalyst helps fund people to get their MVP ideas across, but then it's like, what's next? And I wanted Intersect to be an open door for them where they can come under us, mature their open source practice, build their contributor base, even get a business model built out of it, depending on what the project's about, and go into a mature status so we can ensure the success of Cardano community projects. And then you have the strategy, which attacks all of this. So yeah, that's the world of open source, and we should have pilots results out in the next 2 weeks of where we stand. But yeah, that's our structure and everything at a high level.
Yeah, congratulations. This is a mouthful. It's impressive. Obviously, you guys really know what, how you're structuring things. I'm just going to copy this link from here and drop it on the doc that we're working on, and we're going to include this one in the YouTube notes when we publish the recording. So yeah. Hopefully that was a great introduction for everyone here. The main goal is to create a sort of a roundtable where you can actually reach a number of community members that I know are here. There are builders, many of them are focused on open source. I don't know, like cherry picking even from this type of framing. Is there anything that anyone would like to jump to? Chris, do you want to? Can I call you Chris?
Yeah, I mean.
Okay, so yeah, so let me know. Does this sound like interesting so far to you to go over, or would you like to jump to some specific parts?
Yeah, well, in the piece I can go to the support services too, because I think that is of interest to everyone who's not directly one of the core Cardano projects. We can come to that after. But definitely one of my things is trying to get Intersect to actually have impact within the Cardano community and projects. So I'm trying to find those pains and needs from everyone. And I'll drop this to you now. I'm kind of confident with the stuff in here. So this will be the last deck. The only page you have to hover on is slide 5. And this is based on some best practices that Solana's come across in the past. And I just built it and had some review with people based on what is most impactful. But these are things I'm hoping to even get in advanced state for support services that we can offer back to the community. Obviously, the number one thing when we're trying to copy foundation examples like Hyperledger and Linux, PR is one of the big things that projects have a hard time with, especially if you're just a couple of developers. So we did just recently launch our YouTube channel, Twitter, and stuff like that. So we're trying to branch out open source as a subset under the Intersect main channel, but actually connect people with expert communities and get feedback and try to build that out there so people are aware of projects, even offering interviews, how do you do setups with the product demos, things like that. That way you'll at least have marketing material that you can use for your own piece on that. Also the community building, obviously Intersect's kind of becoming that center point for a lot of collaboration, and we're successful if we serve as an information broker or a broker for meeting suppliers, devs, and all that kinds of stuff. So definitely helping with that, but also managing it from a sustainable open source model and helping projects get to that piece. Legal, we still got to figure where that comes into, but we do have a list of attorneys that we can work with, but that's when you come into licensing, code audits, stuff related to that with projects that a dev may not be able to have immediately. We can also help with open source strategy and sustainability. The big one I found out from Toulouse, as well as the closed focus groups, is technical writing and PR documents related to that. I'm building a collection of writers and trying to figure out how we can actually do that successfully. And then also business models. You have an MVP from Catalyst. How do you actually turn it into something that's either an open source library or a product that benefits the community, drives innovation, and you can maybe even make some money on the side for? And then obviously governance. I'm hoping just the standard framework in Intersect can help with that, with our policy, but obviously we're always looking to improve training, design, and product management stuff. So standard services, but to help benefit, be a direct return on investment to membership to Intersect, and then back into Cardano. So
yeah, this is a lot more encompassing than just the open source part. It's really just an incubator. It's almost an incubator for projects. So congratulations. I hope it comes through and that it achieves all those areas. I'm just going to drop that link here so I don't forget it. And this is the part, you call it, sorry, what did you call it?
Service catalog.
Yeah,
my idea is if you're coming into a restaurant, you look at the menu and you tell us what you want, essentially.
Yeah.
But that way we actually have some impact back. And I think for CBIA, I already talked, I'm going to use Philip DeSaro with Anastasia Labs to be my guinea pig to test the services. So we actually know how we can manage our internal resource management related to it. So he's also on our OSC.
Cool. Great stuff. So do you think it's a good time to focus specifically on infrastructure projects, or do you want to cover these areas first?
I think they complement each other. The collaboration areas were just things that I thought maybe, because I want to help. How do I help y'all is my basic question. So these are just ideas I thought. I don't know if they're relevant or not, but things to talk to.
Yeah. So joint projects and initiatives, resource sharing, community engagement. That's a bit what we are trying to do here, right? To try to reach out to projects. And can you talk a bit about this one?
So
legal side as well, like you were mentioning before.
Yeah. Well, one topic too is when you're talking about building a project, there's always the open source licensing. How do you model it? Obviously, everyone goes to Apache 2 because it's the most user-friendly and keeps everyone safe on the liability side. But there was a conversation about using BSL potentially that came up in the early days, which I think allows you to build proprietary tech for so many years, and then you have to open source it after a certain timeline. I know there's pros and cons to that, but that's kind of where that comes into. If a project has a certain use case and wants to use a certain license, we can help with understanding better the legal ramifications and things like that. So, and I think Salona is kind of the expert in that field from her past experience. If you have any additional thoughts, Salona.
Yeah, so for a lot of that, there are some other compliance issues to always be concerned with. And I did give Christian a legal checklist in regards to that. And I think he mentioned that earlier. Because like for blockchain, for example, you do have to worry about export control in regards to encryption. There is also, doing things in an antitrust fashion so that you don't get in troubles with the FTC. There's a bunch of different aspects like that in regards to compliance. One of the main things that I did over at the VP, when I was VP at Hyperledger, was a lot of that type of work. There's also some different stuff in regards to if you want to be adopted by other entities, like I did a fair amount of work with the DoD here in the States. And so there's some other stuff that happens there. But for the most part, one of the I think the biggest part of my budget at Hyperledger was security audits. Because any of the different blockchains that we brought in, we would do a fairly sophisticated audit on all of those, anywhere between $50,000 to $250,000 each. So it's something to consider and something to always work together with others on for that. And I did notice that you've already got some people, I think, already in your community that do audits. Am I correct? Did I see that in there, Pedro?
Well, and I think the Plutus High Assurance team is trying to make some checks on that too, for their stuff, just to make open source tooling to help the community.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I mean on that. But for the biggest part of that, I would go through the legal checklist that I gave Christian in regards to it, because there's a lot of things that you can get caught up in if you're an independent open source project that can accidentally go astray on you. Like, say, if you didn't handle your trademark and copyrights, people can take those from you. And if you haven't done things correctly in regards to IPR, like one document I had, one open source projects that I had, people inserted predatorily some IPR into the documentation. And then the developers actually went and created it. And then they filed a lawsuit against us.
Sorry, could you clarify the IPR?
Intellectual property rights.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and so I was on one open source project. And so that's one reason why I don't use Creative Commons on my documentation. I only use Apache 2, because that would have caught that person's purposeful planting of information. It's really insidious. There's groups out there, and there's a lot of patent trolls, and the patent trolls are aware of open source, and they do come in and do things like that. And I put the rules in place because, one of the funny jokes that I talk about all the time is I said, I put rules in place not because I'm a person who likes rules. I'm a hippie with purple hair. I put them in place because I have scars for when I didn't have them. And so that's why I'm so strict on the IPR, is because I had someone malignantly put in an idea that they were in the process of patenting. And then after they patented, they came back at the project and killed it. So,
and going back to the trademark thing, my favorite use case is a guy who registered the McDonald's name in Jordan and got to get some blackmail money so he could give that back to McDonald's before they opened up business. So
that's one reason why so many open source projects, even though they don't always want to go to the Linux Foundation, do go to the Linux Foundation, because they're big enough that they have a big stick and they can hit people with it to protect themselves. So I'm hoping that perhaps, we can figure out a way to all bond together in regards to this and not have to deal with those predatory people in regards to the open source that we want to do for Cardano. So that's one reason why we have the checklist and we do all that kind of stuff. But any questions? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I'm sure if any builders, anyone that's currently building open source projects, any thoughts? Does this sound good to you? Does it sound it's going to be useful to
It sounds
have
pretty
this kind of
parallel.
orientation?
Well, it sounds pretty parallel with stuff that we're doing with Pragma, so I definitely feel for them what they're going through. We're doing this there too, and the projects right there right now are Aiken and Amaru. So no, everything they're saying, this rings.
Yeah, I'm actually happy Pragma, because that was on my radar for the future after we got core Cardano settled, was the Rust node. And I'm glad Pragma picked that up, so I kind of done in parallel. So
Oh, we've been working on it for a little while.
gotcha.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
The topics I want.
Just quickly commenting, Pedro. So I'm also building one open source library. It's actually for the Java developers, and getting exposed to the open source and Cardano now. I'm coming some background from Catalyst side, so excuse me for that. But I know that we are having here different setup. Now, I will have this kind of basic fundamental question, and from my experience that there's a lot of some of the things are a lot of duplication is there. The similar tools people are developing, right? So how that can be streamlined? Will that be a scope of this committee or not? I mean, and I think there are some essential tools are not being built. On other side, similar tools are being built. So how we kind of managing that?
It's definitely a conversation to be had. I think we even had a conversation about doing a patterns group. And I think that falls in line with that, Solana, possibly trying to reduce redundancy and bad practice patterns, and what not to do, basically, from other industry practices in the past. But that's definitely something we need to talk about, and that's where I think this partnership helps, because we don't know what we don't know, and if y'all know, that helps us help y'all, essentially.
Okay. So in other words, as we go along, we'll figure it out that how to deal with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right now, the committee, our Q1 and Q2, and I guess that's where we can talk about the roadmap piece of it, was kind of getting everything streamlined for open source and making sure Intersect, because Intersect gigantically is basically a giant OSPO, for lack of a better word, or open source program office. Everything they're supposed to do is open source and drive development related to that. And we need to get the groundwork done, since core Cardano was only open source in the sense that it was on GitHub for the most part. They did some more things, but now that we're at the end of Q2, I feel like we're actually mature enough to actually start addressing these community concerns. So that's why my open source office roadmap is about reaching out and building strategic partnerships, onboarding external projects, and then doing that legal compliance, and making sure project lists or SBOMs actually make sense. So.
Okay. Understand. Thanks.
Guys, any more questions for the open source office from the community builders?
Yeah, maybe I can talk a bit like about Marlowe. So I don't know if you're aware of the situation of the Marlowe project. It was like founded by IOG, for 5 years, and now it's like becoming like a community-led project. So it's going to be out of IOG, we hope, maybe in July. And so we're going to have this particular relation between Intersect and the Marlowe project. Like we have a lot of dependencies, like all the Cardano core projects, they are under your umbrella, and so we are using that heavily, and we don't have any relationship so far, with you. Like I'm in the Discord, I'm touching a lot of projects that you are managing, but like I don't have a proper understanding of the who I should talk to. Like I have PRs that are holding for 2 weeks, things like that. So can you direct me to a
I had heard
of contact, and then that for it to be efficient?
Yeah, I don't mind being a POC for most things.
Okay.
That's why I made myself become more forward, so anyone in the community can interact with me. Adam's here as well. He's very connected on that side of things with Marlowe. I know they were going to start a technical working group, but I didn't know exactly where its home was going to be after IOG. So I've been kind of waiting for that community decision. Adam?
Yeah, and that's probably a good segue and intro that we are currently piloting and working on a project for Christian touched on community maintainership of these repos, because essentially a lot of them have only been maintained and active because IOG was paying people to do so. So how are we going to take over the community run aspect of these, or Intersect run aspect of these repositories? And so we have a lot of repos with a lot of stale issues and a lot of ignored pull requests and things like that. So we're definitely in the process of building out that framework. But yeah, it's really going to take a show of hands from the community in a lot of respects to say, like, who is willing to at least be the guy that checks this repository and make sure that we're making progress and kicking people in the backside when they need it and things like that.
And yeah, I would like to become like a maintainer of some of the projects you have, and I don't know how to become one, for example, like that.
Yeah, and that's just because that documentation isn't quite written yet. So we'll hopefully get there in the near future.
So don't forget me. If you forget about me, I would come.
Well, that segues into my like and subscribe commentary. But if you're on the Discord channel, we have the open source office hours, I think next Thursday. Is it this Thursday? There's a Thursday on a bi-weekly cadence. We hold open hours so people can come talk to us whenever. And then the open source committee is an open call for anybody as well. So
Yeah, it's
the only
tomorrow.
thing we deny is AIs. That's about it. But I'll keep in touch with you next week, 26th. Nicholas.
Yeah, if you can drop a link for that call, or maybe we'll find it on the Intersect server, right?
Yeah, it is on the Discord event server.
Yeah, I noticed I'm pretty sure it's going to happen tomorrow. So.
Okay, our office hours is going to be next week, but the committee call is this Friday. So.
Okay.
I'm trying to make them off center so everyone has touch base at least once a week.
Sounds good. So I'm just tidying up the links on the document, but hopefully we'll have more questions from community builders on the call. Anyone? If not, maybe we could touch a bit on the infra side of things, as we are the infrastructure, infrastructure-focused group. We know, like you were just saying, you were just touching on the point that there's Pragma working on the Rust node. Are there any more things, like more core infrastructure that you can think of, Chris?
Well, I think Icon's going to Pragma too. But I know there's a bunch of smart contract languages that still might be out there on their own. I know officially we only have Plutus at the moment, but that's where that incubation piece comes in, which is what I point to. If it's something that should be at Intersect, I kind of want community consent to help us highlight these core projects so we can make sure that they always have a future ahead of them, if it's lack of sustainability at any point. Helios.
Helios, yeah.
I'll look that one up.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have many more questions, but I had a point here around governance in overall, but that's going to take a number of months or anything. So you're set in stone, and you're going to be having your budget and stability to do your work for quite a long time, correct?
Yeah, there's only one thing I can probably help clarify that, at least from the. So take this with a grain of salt. It's completely not completely reliable. I'd say it's 50% there. This is kind of the governance of Intersect, at least within the tech ops right now. I think this is now called the Roadmap Committee, but essentially this covers the governance policy that we had. So I'll use Cardano address as Adam's new favorite child right now as an example. But essentially, Cardano addresses, he's a maintainer. He works with CF in the IOI teams to help make sure things are being pulled and stuff. And then we'll expand that once we conclude the pilot. But it's a part of a working group that meets regularly, that manages obviously Cardano wallet and other wallets within Intersect or community interest altogether. But if there's issues here that Adam's unable to take care of on day-to-day things, or the Slack channel that he has set up, we'll take it to this working group. And if it doesn't get solved there, we take it to the core Cardano meeting, which will be coming. And if they can't take care of it, then we take it to the technical steering committee and get security issues or things like that raised. But essentially, the supporting functions, you have the open source committee, which represents the Intersect membership base. They tell us what to do, and then we get our plans reviewed by them. And then we coordinate the work that comes out of the committee by forming the technical working groups, ensuring their success, and doing a feedback loop mechanism that leads into the repos once policies come out of it. Similarly, the technical steering committee, they're going into their bootstrap phase right now. They have the delivery assurance folks with Duncan Suter and Matt Davis, but they're going to be doing the supplier contracts and ensuring that work goes in, and that gives you the suppliers for the development side of work. The roadmap committee I think Salona's the current representative on that at the moment. But essentially that's determining the pipeline of how community feature requests go through, which eventually come into the roadmap for Cardano. And then it gets a technical evaluation on whether it's feasible, and then goes through a vote to turn into a contract. completely not my sphere, so I could have said that wrong, but that's my basic understanding. And then the working groups are the feedback mechanisms that these feature requests come out of, and it kind of goes full circle. But anything you want to add to that, Salona?
Sure. Right now, so we're working on the for the roadmap portion. What we're doing is we're first actually mapping out our current state projects, which are all the projects that were already previously funded, and going through the entire process. And then we are doing an entire thing where we're working on what the journey map is going to be to get to a future state, so that we can have something that's a bit more rigorous. And that feeds into some of the stuff that Christian was just talking about, where, for example, having the technical steering committee owning the technical working groups that give a lot of feedback on the projects that are coming through and where they're at and what they're, where they're at in regards to monetization and productization and things of that nature. And also doing some benchmarking and feedbacking methodologies that we hope can also still be tied to monetization. So basically doing a lot of stuff that, Catalyst does a lot of really good work. But a lot of times it's not really focused on productization and sustainability. And so we're trying to bring a lot of that into the process as well, and using the community to create all this. So like Christian is just now helping me, where we did a repo that's just for maps. And we're going to use Draw.io so that we can do versioning, so that we can all take all of our maps together that are scattered around the ecosystem and start working together towards creating something that's more cogent for us all. Questions? Because I know that's probably a lot.
Yeah. We'll have sections on YouTube to explain that later on as well.
Well, right now we're working on the marketing bit for that. So what we're going to be doing soon is I've been working on some positioning so that we can launch this to everyone and do it well, so that we can bring everybody to engage with it on it and show that we're creating something that's truly, like next level open source. One of the things I like to talk about is what I call the openness index, and there's like open source where you're like, here's the code, and then you run off, and then there's like the next level where you're like, oh, now you can find the code. It's like, okay, now you can give feedback to change it. No, now you're changing things yourself and we're accepting it. Okay, now you're, in the upper echelon that, the open source committee talks about a lot is governance, where the real goal a lot of times is to become one of those maintainers where you start helping with the decision making. Well, it's even better to go beyond just the maintainers who are coders, but also to start to look at, businesses don't hire designers and product people and all that kind of stuff for fun, right? They do it because they want to have something that keeps going. And so if we can start helping with that, that's, I think, a really primary goal, is to make sure that we create things that are sustainable and able to be monetized well.
And brief mention to my future dream for Cardano. This is something to march to, but I already got myself tagged in it on a marketing video at Consensus, so I have to fulfill it at some point, is turning Cardano into the world's first successful paid open source model. We have all the variables, but it's not how do you execute it right. And so we could all be part of this new world-changing thing. So see how we get there.
Yep. Nick?
Yeah, out of curiosity, like I have some organizational questions. Like, how many people is behind Intersect? And then also in IOG they were speaking about IOI, Intersect organization, something, infrastructure. So I guess you have like a lot of people coming from this structure, but like can you just explain how many people you are, and then
So it was a lot of the work was done under IOG with the Voltaire team. So there are 12 of us, and I think 10 of us went to Intersect staff. But the mandate that Intersect had to deliver by year end to get through Voltaire, we hired on a bunch of consultants for this 1 year engagement. So that's why you see a bunch of sporadic stuff, but they're there for the interim to help us deliver that solution. I myself, I've kind of been neutral to the founding entity political situation. I was just an open source analyst that joined in, but was on this DCF project, which became Constellation, which became Voltaire, and now Intersect. So I've kind of become a SME, but that's our whole target thing. And then I think they expand the governing board to have those two community members on it as well. So currently it's IOG Emergo, guy from Argentina, and someone from, I think, a university. Can't remember. But the community advisory board appointed them. Uday?
Yeah, just kind of taking from the last slide, and I think it's nicely put through that. Sorry, what is it? Nicely put through that we have technical committee and the open source one. Little confusing to me. I mean, I think the open source is going to work on technology as well. So what is it? But I think nicely put that it's also productization concept. So I like it. So I think there are the three things then: product thinking, another one technical or development or core technology, and thinking of the open source. Now, to me, the open source and technology is more closer, but the product thinking is kind of a little different. Maybe there should be attention to think or have this product concept kind of more focused and separated.
Well, and that's where it's highlighted as vision there, but that's where the roadmap piece comes into it. Because you have three different areas you have to address. You have the core tech itself, which is where the TSC comes in and mandates how, or their expert opinion on how the code base should work, what's feasible, what's not. The open source committee is focused on how development should work in an open source practice, and consult on the pain points with that and make that process a lot better. And then the roadmap feeds in all the community requests in a product management function, puts it on a roadmap, and then the TSC coordinates that into actual contracted work. So I think
maybe then I missed it. I think that so roadmap related team or committee is separate kind of the thing. Is it?
Yeah, it's the TBD because it wasn't flushed out whenever I drafted that in October last year. So.
Okay, got it. Good.
Yeah, and the thing too is we are learning from all the other foundation models, so it should be somewhat similar. The only thing that I know fully fledged is how open source is working. Try to make that. I don't think we're going to change the structure much there. So, Salona?
So I'm going to take one hat off and put another hat on. And one of the things that, because I do a lot of the different open source, and the open source sustainability is a big part of my career. I got to go to a wonderful think tank at Princeton 2 months ago, and there was a bunch of Web3 people there. There were people from Filecoin and Protocol and the ED from Haskell, and I'm forgetting something. One of the other major groups, but anyhow, we're all looking at something similar right now, which is really interesting, so talking with like people at Polygon and Avalanche and everything else, we're all trying to figure out how do we get away from this grant funding model, because it's so hard, and sometimes, and so oftentimes things get abandoned because people are working so hard to do the grant process and do all that. It's not a sustainable model, right? You have to have the productization for things to continue to exist. And so I actually have a nonprofit that I'm working on in regards to doing that kind of stuff. So that I think it's a really frequent thing. And so that's why Christian and I have been talking about trying to get Cardano to be the first to actually do the models. So yeah.
Yeah. And to attack that too, when we started open source and Voltaire and Intersect, all the governance stuff of Voltaire is really good because it at least unlocks the treasury to make sure Cardano can get up and running and kind of preload where we should be already compared to other blockchains when it comes to adoption. And we have the infrastructure, it's good, but we need to actually get that commercialization and public adoption so that way we can have a sustainable model. Because right now the roadmap's good for 4 to 5 years, but what happens when it's only spending and not reimbursing the treasury with transactions and things like that? And I'm happy to see just a special shout out because one catalyst proposal that got my attention was the patent work Charlie 3 in an office is doing, because they're actually working with a legal firm with the U.S. Patent Office to tie in Cardano as the back end if the MVP proves itself. But that actually ties in another piece to U.S. adoption, which I don't know why we're so late to the game. It's annoying in some regards, but that'll help get there. And then if Fit 21 comes in and we get Cardano marked as a commodity, there's a bunch of things on the horizon. We just got to get the baseline structured here, and then there's the whole. I know there's a side initiative with different working groups too on trying to build a project VC funding model. So you have Catalyst to get you to MVP. Intersect can help you get the business model running, and then there's a separate group for helping get that seed funding and turning things into business models. So we're maturing that way. So, but a lot of TBDs on stuff, unfortunately. But if anyone
Guys,
has to,
I'm just allowing some space for everyone else to jump in. I see Roberto, for example, from Gumbo Labs and Andamio, where they're trying to educate and get more people building. I see Alex, a number of people that maybe could jump in and say, but what do you think of this? And especially from my part, I think it's really interesting. I wasn't expecting to hear so much about productization and monetization of things, because I thought it was basically going to be about Apache or a little more. So it's amazing to see how things articulate between the committee, the office, and I hope we have, maybe we can come back to doing a call like this in a month or two. I'm surely going to take a look at your YouTube channel and a bit more. And also, one thing that came to mind is like when you actually can start working with community projects, is that's going to be like building in public, and you're going to be listing those entities and sharing a bit learnings and how things have been going with those projects?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not limiting our PR or anything like that. Open source and blockchain are, especially Cardano, are supposed to be transparent and decentralized by nature. So anything I'm doing other than, I guess, my private messages, but last thing I wanted to plug there was you do have Apache, right? They're successful, but it's completely volunteer run, and kind of you ensure your own success by the amount of work you put into. Then you have Linux, which has best practices, helps you with the big stick, speak softly. But it's a lot of PR related stuff and not necessarily ensuring every single project is a success. I kind of want to meet in the middle where we have all the documentation, we can collaborate, be a center of best practice, and then also ensure that the projects are community viable, have a future, and supported the best way possible. Trying to marry the best of different foundations. Solana?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out the reason I'm kind of like in a weird role, because basically Tam and Charles hired me because of the previous work that I've done in regards to helping. I've helped 4 companies go from proprietary to open source. I actually advised the 5th one not to, and instead got them on Open API. And then I also did intersourcing at PayPal, and then of course, the stuff at Hyperledger, and then launching my own nonprofit for doing open source ecosystems. And just to point off on the thing that you said about productization, and that's one of the big reasons that they brought me in to try to help nurture things, is that's one of their goals, is because they were like, how if you can come in and just keep advising and helping these different groups in the ecosystem on getting to that path, then that's worth it for us to try to nurture things through. So I just wanted to point that out to everyone, is that's why I'm here. So that's why I'm so biased in regards to it.
Okay. Yeah, we've been going in circles for a bit, well, not in circles, but I've been asking for any more questions for a while. If there's no more questions, maybe we can leave it at this for today. Any final notes, final remarks from anyone, calls to action? Lee?
Oh no, I hit that button by accident. No final calls for action. Sorry about that.
Okay. Again, thanks for coming by. Maybe, like I said, let's try to revisit this in 2 months, for example. I would love to see to know about progress, and that's it for today. See you soon.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Lucas. Appreciate you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Have a good one, everybody.
Talk to you later, Lee.
Thank you.
Take it easy, Christina.